Hi, and welcome to Freedom Rocs. Today we're discussing legislation that has been introduced in the New York State Legislature regarding the right to keep and bear arms, or offending the right to keep and bear arms, as the case may be. We'll start with the proposal in the Assembly for child-operated firearms, or rather, for not having so-called child-operated firearms, which I guess are any firearms that can be operated by a child, much along the lines of saying that, you know, if you have a knife in your kitchen, it's a child-operated knife just because a child can operate it. That's the logic here. I mean, the gun manufacturers aren't producing weapons specifically to be fired by children, but, you know, this is the kind of rhetoric that we have to deal with.
That's correct. And just a little background information. This is 2011. It's an odd-numbered year. The state legislature operates on a 2-year legislative cycle beginning in January of an odd-numbered year. And at the beginning in January of every odd-numbered year, the Democratic fascists in Albany keep reintroducing some of the same garbage every 2 years. The first issue we'd like to talk about is, as Chris said, the child-operated firearm, so-called. And this was introduced in the Senate by Senator Serrano. There is, if I recall correctly, an identical bill in the Assembly. See, one of the problems with this bill, although it may sound good to prohibit child-operated firearms, what the bill says, in its entirety actually, is that it adds a new section, 265.18, to the New York State Penal Law, which reads, quote, sale of child-operated firearms, child-proofing. Section 1. No person, firm, limited liability company, or corporation engaged in the retail business of selling rifles, shotguns, or firearms shall sell, deliver, or transfer any child-operated firearm to another person. Section 2. For the purposes of this section, child-operated firearm means a pistol or revolver manufactured 12 months or more after the effective date of this section, which does not contain a child-proofing device or mechanism incorporated into the design of such pistol or revolver to effectively preclude an average 5-year-old child from operating the pistol or revolver. Such devices or mechanisms shall include, but not be limited to, the capacity to adjust the trigger resistance to at least a 10-pound pull, the capacity to alter the firing mechanism so that an average 5-year-old's hands are too small to operate the pistol or revolver, or the capacity to require a series of multiple motions in order to fire the pistol or revolver. Section 3. The superintendent of the state police shall, in consultation with such gun manufacturers and such superintendent, as such superintendent deems appropriate, adopt rules and regulations establishing the minimum standards for child-proofing devices or mechanisms to ensure that such child-proofing devices or mechanisms are safe and effective. Section 4. Any person, firm, or corporation who violates the provisions of this section shall be guilty of a Class A misdemeanor. It says, this act shall take effect on the 1st of November next succeeding the date on which it shall have become law. Now, let's take a look at what it says here. Let's see, contain a child-proofing device or mechanism incorporated into the design of such pistol to prevent a 5-year-old from operating the pistol or revolver. How do they know? How do they know what's going to prevent a child from operating the pistol or revolver?
It hasn't worked too well with the child-proof caps.
No, no.
You know,
I mean, anybody who can read the words push and turn and follow the arrow knows that you push the cap down and turn it.
Yeah, and when those first came out, children were actually able to operate them more easily because adults, they get old, they get in the habit of doing things, and they're like, okay, get this open, and then, you know, they hand it to their child, and it's like, just push down and turn, mommy, you know, like, so, you know, it's kind of the same thing that you're talking about there.
Well, ironically, I'm an occasional cigar smoker. Well, when I was 18, they came out with, 18 or 19, I forget exactly, they came out with the child-proof lighters that you had to push the little thing up into the button before lighting it. There was no instruction on the box for how to use that. I'm trying to figure out how to, I had to ask my 14 or 15-year-old sister how to operate the lighter, because I didn't know you had to push the little thing up. Kids will figure this out. You require multiple motions to fire it. Those motions will make their way into Hollywood movies. Kids will see the Hollywood movies and know how to operate those multiple motions. Additionally, one of the provisions is that it be too big for the average 5-year-old's hands to operate. But that begs actually a couple obvious questions. One, what about little people? Adults. Adults of unusually small stature who are, in fact, adults and have the full rights of adults. Someone's 21 years old or older, say Vern Troyer, for example. He's not getting his hands around a 1911. So requiring that the grip be too big for a 5-year-old's hands would make a certain segment of the firearms, certain segment of firearm designs unavailable for adults.
No, not to mention the 10-pound trigger pull. I mean, it's elderly people are more often the victims of crimes because, you know, muggers will think, oh, this is an easy, victory for me, you know, and if the 10-pound trigger pull can be a lot for an older person, you know, it's not just going to affect children, it's going to affect the elderly, it's going to affect handicapped people, it's going to affect, you know, the most vulnerable segments of our population that need self-defense. Also, the 10-pound trigger pull, and we'll get back to this after the break, which is coming up soon. The 10-pound trigger pull seriously impairs someone's ability to target shoot, especially combined with the requirement of a multiple motions or a large grip. And we'll be right back. It's a common misconception that household firearms inherently pose a safety risk.
There's always a temptation to store your household firearms unlocked so they can be accessed as quickly as possible. The problem is this leaves them accessible to children. With a quick access gun safe, you keep your household firearms locked up and away from your children. But if somebody breaks into your house, you've got quick and easy access to your firearm.
Burglars know the sound of a slide racking. If they hear that sound, they'll know they're in danger and hopefully leave.
As you may have noticed, you can watch Freedom Rocs for free on RCTV or on YouTube, but it takes money to produce good quality TV shows. You can support Freedom Rocs by shopping at our Cafe Press shop. There you can find t-shirts for men and women, tote and gym bags, coffee mugs, beer steins, food and beverage thermoses, and a bunch of other items Cafe Press offers. You can find our shop at cafepress.com/freedomrocs, all lowercase and no apostrophe.
Hi, welcome back to Freedom Rocs. We are discussing firearms legislation that has been introduced in the New York State Assembly. Current topic of discussion is the so-called child-operated firearms legislation.
That's correct. First of all, I'd like to remind you that this is a cable access show. That means we don't get Nielsen ratings. So we don't know you're watching unless you tell us you're watching. So if you get a chance, swing by this website at the bottom of your screen, freedomrocs, rocs.cybermansoftware.com. Let us know what you think, what you like, what you don't like. If you'd like to be a guest, if you have a strong opinion one way or another on a libertarian important issue, then we might be interested in having you on. Now back to some of these requirements. It says where was it? The state police, the superintendent of the state police shall, in consultation with such gun manufacturers as such superintendent deems appropriate, adopt rules and regulations establishing minimum standards for childproofing devices and mechanisms to ensure that such childproofing devices or mechanisms are safe and effective. Now, that means the superintendent of the state police can set pretty much whatever standard he wants, since previously in the law it says shall include but not be limited to the capacity to adjust the trigger resistance to at least a 10-pound pull, the capacity to alter the firing mechanism, the child hands are too small to operate the pistol or revolver, or the capacity to require a series of multiple motions. Now, for those who aren't familiar with target shooting, when you're shooting at a 3-inch bullseye 50 feet away, any little motion at all can throw your aim off course. Now, try this little experiment at home. If you have a laser pointer, regular key ring laser pointer, try taping that to your hand with the button on and pointing at a 3-inch circle 50 feet away. See how well you're able to hold it on course, hold that laser on target. Now, of course, bear in mind you don't want to point a laser at anybody. They can if they get into your eye, they can damage your retina. So don't point it at a person. Just point it at a circle 50 feet away. See how easily you can hold it on course, on target. Then stop by a sporting goods store that sells weightlifting equipment. Try this. Try not with the laser attached. Try grabbing a 10-pound barbell plate, holding it on your finger. See how easily you can lift that weight 5 times, and see if your hand trembles while you do it. That's what we're talking about here. When you shoot a firearm, you've got to hold that grip perfectly still while you squeeze the trigger. Now, if you have to struggle against a 10-pound trigger, that's going to cause your hand to tense up and throw the gun off course, off target. That's not a good thing for target shooters. Now, if it requires multiple motions, that poses a problem for the National Gallery course, which has 3 stages. Slow fire, multiple motions, not a problem there. Timed fire and rapid fire. Timed fire, you're shooting 2 strings of 5 rounds, 20 seconds per string. That means you've got 20 seconds to shoot 5 rounds. In the rapid fire stage, you've got 10 seconds to shoot 5 rounds. Now, if you have to go through multiple motions in order to fire it each time, that's going to throw off your aim. It's going to throw off your timing, and the 10-pound trigger squeeze is going to throw off your aim. And let's face it, not all adults have big hands like mine. Not all adults can grab a firearm that's, quote, too big for a 5-year-old.
Yeah, and when you think of it from a self-defense perspective too, I mean, let's assume that the superintendent required and this is likely, both a 10-pound trigger pull and the multiple motions, right? So you're walking down the street, you know, and someone jumps out at you from an alleyway. You know, are you gonna do like all these complicated motions, right? And then, you know, they're coming at you, maybe, you know, with their fist or with a blunt object. And then once you've got all that done, you've still got to do the 10-pound trigger pull. You know, it's like everything conspires to make it impossible to use a firearm for the purposes that it was intended to be used, whether it's self-defense, whether it's target shooting, basically anything. This is a law that prevents adults from operating their firearm, or at least makes it extremely difficult. It's not about children at all. It's just another burden to be added to you know, the list of what gun owners already have to deal with.
Yeah, well, I mean, to be perfectly fair, they could require multiple motions. Could just be a simple matter of turning off a safety switch and squeezing the trigger, or racking the slide and squeezing a trigger, or something along those lines.
But then why have this law at all?
Well, because they want to get rid of guns that don't have safety switches.
Oh.
Now, for example, my Kel-Tec P11 9mm handgun, which you just saw during the last PSA break, that doesn't have a safety switch. The reason is that it's double action only. That means the hammer is never cocked until I squeeze the trigger, which means there's no point in having a safety. The purpose of a mechanical safety is to block a cocked hammer from falling. If you don't have a cocked hammer, you don't need the safety switch, because you've already got the built-in safety of, and safety in its conventional sense, of not having a cocked hammer.
Yeah, well, we've only got about 30 seconds left. I think we've covered pretty much all the flaws in this design. I'll just bring up the rhetoric one more time. I mean, you know, just because I have a kitchen hatchet, and I remember one time when I was 6 years old, I went into the knife drawer and I took out my parents' kitchen hatchet, not for malicious purposes, mind you, but I did put a frickin' dent in the trampoline. But anyway, it's not a child-operated hatchet just because a child can operate it. So anyway, we'll see you next time.
What?
Hit the target both times.
Okay, I think it's my turn. I'm good at this. Okay.
Put it up. You got one, Aaron.
I got one! Yes! I got two.
The Greater Rochester Libertarian Party reminds you that the best way to keep your teens in school and out of trouble is to spend quality time with them.
She shoots like a girl.
Did you know high-quality versions of all episodes of Freedom Rocs are available on DVD? Each DVD contains 3 episodes for just $15. We also have specials that aren't on RCTV or YouTube. You can find links to all of our DVDs on the Freedom Rocs website, freedomrocs.cybermansoftware.com.
Hi, and welcome back to Freedom Rocs. I just wanted to say one thing about what I said before the break, and that is this, a gun, like a hatchet, like, you know, poisonous chemicals.
Knife, bleach.
Right, anything. The solution to keeping them out of the hands of children is to put them on a high shelf, or put them in a locked container, or keep them out of the reach of children. You know, it's far more effective to simply put it in a place where your children can't get access to it at all than to rely on the childproof safety mechanism.
Yes, and that reminds me, in a future episode, one of the things we're planning to discuss is mandatory safe storage. Now, obviously, safe storage is a good thing, but there's plenty to dislike about this safe storage legislation that's coming up, which was sponsored in the Assembly by Cook, Simbrowitz, Dinowitz, Galef, Jacobs, Ortiz, Engelbright, Rosenthal, Aubrey, Brennan, Clark, Gottfried, Hooper, Mayerson, Millman, Perry, Pfeffer, Scarborough, Wright, and I apologize if I mispronounced any of those names. A couple other issues, a couple other pieces of legislation we're going to discuss is the temporary surrender of firearms for state-mandated mental exam. That's if someone is brought in for evaluation or is going to trial and they're evaluating to see if they are qualified to stand trial. Now, we don't necessarily have a problem with this, but we believe it could be worded better, and stay tuned for information for our explanation of why. There's a bill to prohibit secondhand dealers from selling firearms. There's a bill to require all transfers of firearms to be done by way of a federal firearm licensee. There's a bill to require a license for all ammunition sales, despite what the summary of the bill says. There's a bill to require a proficiency exam, and we'll discuss why that is bad. There's a bill, believe it or not, there's actually a bill for shall issue licensing, which would essentially take the judicial discretion out of the licensing process so that any person who's legally qualified to have a pistol license would automatically be approved when they apply. And we'll discuss why that's a good thing. There's a bill to establish a committee to define standards for so-called smart guns that can only be, supposedly, only be fired by their rightful users. There's a bill for coded ammunition. Oh boy, are we going to have fun with this one. Little heads up, we're going to go over some math on that one. Liability insurance for pistol licenses. Armor-piercing, frangible, or devastator ammunition. And once again, we're going to go into a little bit of science on that one. License expiration, more math. Microstamping, more science.
Or lack thereof in the case of microstamping.
Well, no, we'll present scientific evidence about why it's bad. There's exactly the opposite of shall issue. There's requirement for an examination and only issuing pistol licenses to people who can demonstrate a bona fide need, kind of like that ever so safe city of New York. And here's some more where we can scientifically demonstrate that it's a bad idea, and that is COBIZ expansion. COBIZ is the Combined Ballistic Identification System. It's what the folks who watch CSI like to call ballistic fingerprinting. And we're going to show why that won't work and how ineffective it's been up to now in the first almost decade of its existence.
It has not solved a single crime.
No. Well, solved perhaps, depending on how you define solved, but it hasn't led to any arrests, let alone convictions. And of course, we're looking for guests. If you would like to discuss issues of importance to libertarians, pro or con, we can arrange a debate. If you're against any of our issues, then swing by this website, Freedom Rocs rocs.cybermansoftware.com. So,
Yeah.
anything else to say about
Well, on the Second Amendment issues, there's a few things to say. The Rochester City Council is considering legislation, which has some good points and some bad points, regarding firing ranges in Rochester, of which there currently are none.
But the good news is this bill would open it up.
Yeah, it would open it up. There's some parts of it that I think need to be reworded, but it's not necessarily bad legislation. So that's something to look forward to.
And, well, it was introduced by, we got this revolving door of mayors right now. It was introduced by, what was it, Tom Richards?
Was it Tom Richards?
It was Tom Richards who introduced it. This is a good thing. This bill is definitely a good thing. While it does increase some of the requirements for shooting ranges, it also increases the opportunity, and we'll go into full detail about that legislation when we run that episode. Until then, go to cityofrochester.gov, where you can, or we'll link to it from our show's website. If you go to cityofrochester.gov and look up legislation that was proposed for the January 25th meeting, they wound up keeping it in committee, but it was proposed to be considered at the January 25th meeting. It will probably be proposed, it'll probably be considered at the February meeting. If we get this to air before that, please read the legislation. I think it's introductory number 21. I could be mistaken. But if you read the legislation, you'll see that it'll open up the range, it'll open up shooting ranges to more than just 22 short. So read the legislation, contact Councilmember Adam McFadden, tell him this is a good bill. Tell him this is a good bill and you want it passed, and we'll see you next week.